starting with the basic sunset effect created in the last tutorial, which, if you remember, is a combination of sky effects and a HDRI backdrop added together. What I want to do is convert this into a HDRI backdrop that also includes the HDRI backdrop that's been added in. Now, I can't use Bryce to do that directly, but it can be done. You can either use the tutorials created by Horror that are provided with your Bryce 7 content, or you can use a product that Horror and I have made, and since it's our product, I might as well use it. So this can be found at Bryce Tutorials, Bryce Downloads, and in the list here somewhere you'll see Scene Converter to HDRI Backdrop, and using this then I'm going to capture this sky with its HDRI combined and these the sun object there. So the sun effect on this sphere, I could just add that to the create library of this sphere as long as I can find it again. So I'll just add it in there, and then I can get it back in a bit. And the sky I can just add to the sky library, and that will incorporate its HDRI backdrop. So having saved those two bits, I now use the scene converter. So I'll load in the scene converter. It looks like this. It's the camera pointing upwards, so this is the horizon, the perimeter, and I've chosen this one because the imperfections are on the outside edge, so they'll be directly underneath the camera, so they're not really going to take any part in the scene that I'm going to create. So I load in the sky settings, and if I just render that now, you'll see already, you get an impression. There's the horizon. This is actually the pole right underneath the camera, and I'm going to use the director's camera to get a look at what the scene looks like. Now this is the mirror element that's capturing the scene, or one of the mirror elements. So what I need to do is place the director's camera more or less where that is going to be, just past it, so I can get an impression of how the scene looks from the perspective of the camera that's capturing the HDRI. And as you can see, the sun's this square blob. So I'll get the sphere back out of the library that I can use to disguise the position of the sun. I'll switch to the overhead view, move it out towards the horizon, and then position it so that it's over the sun. And since I know it was about the right size last time, I just move it out until it's approximately the right size. Try and remember which camera to switch to. So that's placed me the sun over that blob, and what I thought I could do is try and create a more graded haze effect here, once again using this volumetric effect. So I'm going to knock the clouds out by hitting the Alt key, and that will just give me the sky effects. And then I can take this volume effect, Control C, Control V, and enlarge it into an area over the sun. And you can see, because it's white, it's still rather dramatic. So if I make this an orangey colour in both its ambient and its diffuse, and then that can be recombined. It's probably a bit too intense at that, so I could probably get away with reducing the density a bit so that it combines more with the existing backdrop. So I've got an orange glow around the sun, and then I can reduce the intensity of the haze a little bit so that it makes the haze effect more graded towards where the sun is. The center there is not showing up very well because that's obviously inside that to other volume effects. So I could fit one volume effect behind the other, and then the sun can be bright again. And then I'll alter the material. I'll just make it a little bit lighter, I think. Still orange, but slightly lighter, so that it's more dramatic. Maybe too much there. I'll lower the density again. So see, it's just a matter of, as per usual, just getting the effect to the point where you want it, and position it over the sun. I say this is more or less how it's going to look from the perspective of where the sky is going to be captured. So if I switch back to the capture camera now, it's going to render quickly because there's very little in this scene. So what I need to do is just set the document settings so that it produces fairly high resolution render, and I must remember to, once it's rendered, which should only take a few seconds, to save it as a high dynamic range image, and then I can bring it in as a backdrop. When I bring it in as a backdrop, I have to remember to flip it up on its end because of the position of the camera was straight up. So just let that render out. As you can see, it's rendering fairly swiftly, and then when it's done, File, Export Image, and we go HDRI Sunset 1, and I'll save the file as well, so HSC Sunset 1. And now I reset the document setup so it's back, and switch back to the director's camera there. I can now get rid of that effect and get rid of the sphere over the sun, which means it'll look like this, and then I'll go and I'll load in the HDRI that I've just rendered. So here's the HDRI, and I'll add it to the sky, and oh, I must remember to rotate it, so that's 180, 0, 180. We'll bring it round, and now it's adding in again over to the existing effects. So in this case, might not need the sun as a visible object anymore because we've got the backdrop. I'll keep the haze in, so I've turned the haze back on. You see the haze is interacted now with that sky, so I'll set that to black, the horizon effect off the haze, and then I can just thin the haze out or lighten the haze accordingly, so to create another layered effect with the existing effect that's already there. So I don't know quite. Oops, this clouds got turned back on there, and they'll be added onto the sky, so I'll just knock those off again. So at the moment, and I've got the option also in here of I can blend with the sun. Depending what the sun colour is will affect how that looks. If I make the sun yellow, that blends the current haze colour with the sun, but because the field of view is quite narrow, then that's probably not an appropriate choice. So I was just showing you that because it's there. So I'll set the haze colour down to be fairly dark so it matches what's there, and so you can't tell where one's ending and the other's beginning. The sun, as you can see, the haze is interfering with this sun in the HDRI backdrop now, and we can increase the intensity of that backdrop if we wish, and that will bring that up. But I think I'm probably going to have to drop an effect back in there to make the sun look bright enough, or knock the haze out, and that creates that effect. The thing is, if I'm doing volumetric clouds, I'm probably going to need a haze effect. So swings and roundabouts. I'm torn now. I might try and put the clouds in before capturing the backdrop so I can have this incorporated effect, but the thing is, if you have too many volumetric effects at once, things become difficult. So I'll just go back to where I was before I started meddling, and this is when I just captured it, and we'll put some clouds in. So we'll leave things as we are. We won't bring in the new backdrop, we're sticking with the old one at the moment, and I'm going to use these clouds from the free content. They're the big Sur clouds, so I'll select this slab, I'll unlock it so we can move it around, and I'm going to add it into the library here. So I'll just add those clouds into the library, and then I can bring these clouds out of the library just here. They'll tend to come right in at ground level. So now we've got to make sure the clouds are going to be above the level of this effect, otherwise I'm going to have a collision of volumes. I'll move them out into the distance, and then hopefully I can see them from this effect. So this has now brought me volumetric clouds into the scene that are going to be incorporated with this. Now, as an experiment, and I'll see what happens if they collide with the sunset. So that doesn't seem to be too bad. I was expecting one to cut into the other, but let's see that's going to be a problem. Right, but the clouds themselves, we can consider the position of the sun here, should be showing some response to this rather than just being sat there on the horizon. and the colour of the clouds is not really it's appropriate to this effect. They're driven to some extent by the ambient channel, but you can see they're far too white. So if I'll modify the clouds material, and here is where the colours are stored, if I make the underside of the cloud quite dark and the top side a lighter blue, we'll see how that looks if that's more in keeping. That's a bit too dark, I think. So what I can do is, this has got 2 layers, I could add 3 layers, and then if I make these rather dramatically coloured, I can work out which layer corresponds to which part. So I've got an underside, a bit at the top, and this green. So if I was to make that underside, that red area, a sort of dark orange colour, a middle area a sort of dark browny, and the top area a lighter blue. Let's see if that looks more in keeping with the sky settings we've got. So sort of, yes. I'm going to bring the fog haze control and lift the haze up a little bit so it's incorporated more with the clouds, so it's blending them in, and I think I'm going to lighten the colour to see what effect that has to the overall impression. So what we're lacking here is some detail on the underside of the clouds to sort of really highlight where the sun's coming through. And notice I've also, by lifting the clouds, I've switched these other cloud effects on, but I don't know whether I should leave those on or not. I mean, it might be quite an interesting effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a spotlight, and I'm going to make that spotlight point, track the perspective camera. So now I'll enlarge that because it's quite small in this scene, and move it out towards where the sun is, and make sure it's underneath the position where the volume cloud effect is. So now if I have that, I could have it at none, or I know I'll use, I'm trying to think what the best option here is, gradient. I'll use gradient, and I'll set the colour to an orange, a bright orange, make it very bright, and I can't do it there, I've got to edit the gradient and set the colour, so I'll do it that way. So I've got orange to black on the gradient, and we'll increase the range to its maximum range, soften the edge, and let's have a look. If I go object space, I can squash it so it spreads out a little bit more. So what I'm aiming to do is get it to glance the underside of the cloud, if I can. It's not doing very much, is it? No, I've not got that working, or possibly it's not far away enough yet, or it's too far away. I've not decided. So, I need to get it, need to position it so it's out here somewhere, possibly. Then it's, ooh, yeah, that's more dramatic. Right, let's see, switch to this view where it's, so that is catching the underside of the cloud, definitely. Possibly a bit too much. Well, I can, as long as the light remains under the cloud, that's going to work, so I could drag that further out, see what effect that has. That's moved it back towards the horizon, which is probably what I was looking for. Move it in a bit, that's why I chose ranged, and it's got this gradient, so it should cut it out. So that's why I just keep switching to the wrong camera, because I'm not used to using the director's view. I don't want it particularly on that part of the sky. So director's view, position it underneath the sun. So I seem to keep falling in between these two options, so move it forward only a little bit this time. See how it reaches now. That's more like it. So that's about just glancing the underside of this cloud. So if I go to the light source now, edit it and reduce its power, let's try 500. Let's see what that puts us into. And I select the right view. Oh, still a bit too intense there. We'll go 100. That's more like it. So that's now striking the underside of the clouds, so giving this effect of the sun being under the clouds, and we've got a bit of the formation effect there, and the gradient of light through the clouds. So, and this glow around the sun. So as I did last time, before I change my mind, I'm going to capture this as a HDRI backdrop, which means swapping to the perspective camera, and I'm going to use the highest resolution to capture it. So it's going to be my backdrop there. It's going to take a while to render, I think. In fact, I might regret that decision. We'll see how long. I'll just monitor the progress by slipping that down. Let's see how long it predicts it will take to render. So a lot of this sky is going to be lost in the background. Well, that's not too bad. It's going to take a little while. Right, so I'll pause the video here, I'll let that render out, and then we'll just have a look at this as a sunset backdrop, and that can be like stage 2, if you like, of generating this sunset scene. And that is if this is a successful approach. We'll see. Okay, that's that rendered out. Remember to export the image as a HDRI, so we'll change the name and save that, and we'll see what it looks like. Now, it's suspicious that it rendered a little bit too quickly, which probably means that the volumetric clouds aren't particularly high resolution, but until we see it, then it's going to be difficult to judge. So I've just opened an empty scene, and I'll load in the HDRI I've just saved, and I'll make sure it's used as backdrop, add to sky, and set the atmosphere off so that nothing else should be incorporated in the scene. And remember, I must remember to rotate it, because I've chosen this one where the camera is pointing up, so I need to compensate for that by rotating it round. So now let's have a look. Yes, well, there's some banding in the clouds. As I thought, I need to turn the resolution up, and I'd like the sun a little bit closer to the horizon, and maybe this effect closer to the sun. So it looks like I'm going to have to modify this a bit. So I'll change the document setting back down to something more manageable, switch to the director's view again, and have a look what we're doing. Okay, so if I'm going to drop the sky down, I need to capture a backdrop again. So knock the haze off. So let's hit the Alt key. That takes the haze out. The cloud's not going to really interfere with this. It won't be captured into the backdrop if I just use the Bryce one. So I'll just hide the clouds. I'll lock them so they can't move. And so we're just dealing with the sky. No, I didn't want haze. I'll set those to black, so we're back where we were before. Let's have a look. It's just got those clouds in, so not take the clouds out. And then I'm going to lower the sun to the horizon. So if I switch the horizon on, so I've got a point of reference, and I'll have to Control and Alt and double click on the roll ball like I did last time, and I need to hang on because I'm in another thing that's selected. That's what's throwing things out. Right, because I'm inside an object. It's positioning it. I'll have to move it forward, so I'm outside the object, and then I should be able to position the sun. I don't seem to. Here we go. Got it working now. So drop the sun to the horizon, and then I can lower all these effects towards the horizon as well. So keep hitting the wrong thing here. It's Camtasia's playing up. That's the problem. So we get hold of these things. What I don't want to do is accidentally get hold of the scene converter group, because that's going to be somewhat critical to proceeding. So right, I need to generate a backdrop again, use sky. So this is only just doing what I did in the previous tutorial, which is why I'm going through it rather quickly, and just to make a few adjustments here to this scene. So I've reduced it still close to the horizon, and then I'll get the clouds and turn those back on, so they're now visible again, and I'll lower those a bit closer to this. I need to unlock them to the floodlight effect so they pick up more of the effect. We'll see how that looks. Switch to the director's view. So that's where they're clipping on the clouds. So that's a bit closer to the horizon now. There, bring some haze in. See how that looks. Oh, perhaps a bit too much haze, I don't know. I could try that. Sky colour, dark blue, for some description. Which means I'm going to have to use sky colour if I want it to take effect. So that brings it into the, so I've got the halo as I had before, the artificial halo in front of it, a bit of a effect there. I might try and compress this red underneath down a bit by modifying the material on the clouds, so I increase the frequency, it'll compress it slightly, and then the offset to push it down. You get a bit of a preview in there, but it's so faint that it can be difficult to judge. So I just have more of the clouds of a bluey colour that's supposedly being lit by this sky area. So I might have to make the sky a bit lighter to account for that. See how that looks now. So that's still got this gradient on. Maybe the coloration of the blue on the clouds there is a bit dramatic. I might make that greyer there. I don't know whether to make it lighter or darker. I'll make this the brown area lighter, so the transitions aren't as bold as they were before. Clouds are a bit grey now, aren't they? So it's just getting the colours right so things blend nicely and don't look out of place. So obviously we're trying to simulate what's going on in the atmosphere by methods that are to a large extent a bit like cheating. So I've got this area here where the sun's clipping these clouds nicely, then the rest that's blended in with the haze. It'd be good, I don't know whether to try turning the sun on to provide some lighting over the top. We'll enable the sun, set it a bit high, so we'll set it back down again and see what influence that has on the cloud, if any. We're getting a bit of light on the top edge there, that's nice, and it's outlining that corner. Obviously that's going to impair the render time, as will if I go into the settings for this and set it up to quality 20, which will reduce the banding problems that I had before. So now, just for this scene, you can see that it's taking a while, particularly when it gets towards the horizon, because it's looking through a lot of thickness of cloud. So what I'm going to do now then is I'll switch back to the perspective camera view, and that's going to be my scene as it's captured, but when it hits this area it's going to really slow it down. So it's going to be document setup. I'll set it back up to a high resolution and render it, just let it render out in one go, because remember I'm saving this as a HDRI, and you can see now that's going to take quite a bit longer than it did last time. So I'll pause the video again and then we'll see what the results of that's going to be. Hopefully better than it was last time because of turning the quality up and moving the sun around a little bit. So still not come up with a predicted render time, so 1 hour 39. Okay, so that is going to take a while. Right, I shall pause the video at this point. So that's the full scene rendered out. And the important thing to remember to do is that it's got to be all rendered in one go, and then to export the image, and if it's not already got that set, you need to set it HDR. So we'll call this number 3 and save that. So that's the new HDR image, and I'll save this file as well. Save as, and since it was on 1, it'll increment it to 2, and then we'll have a look at what we've got. So I'll open an empty scene and then import the image that I've just created, and remember to rotate it as I have before. So in the Skylab image based lighting, use sky open, and that's the one I've just saved. And oh yes, I want to use this backdrop, add to sky, and then that wants to be 180 0 180. It doesn't matter about it being a light source, I'm just looking at it as it is as a backdrop at the moment. So it just needs to be its most efficient. Remember, atmosphere off. So just looking at what we've got in the backdrop with this higher settings. So it's got a fairly wide field of view setting at the moment, but the point is, as you can see, it's the entire sky. So if something was introduced that reflected a large portion of the sky, I'll just make a reflective sphere for now, then what would happen is that it would reflect the entire sky. I think maybe the blue of that cloud there was a bit light for this backdrop colour of sky. obviously when you're doing this for yourself you can take more time over it and get things set exactly right, but as things stand then, if I stick with this, which I think I will, just for the purposes of completing this, then I think that will do for this backdrop. I'm a little bit concerned the glow effect that I placed in here, you see, I think it clipped the volumetric slab, which is why there's a bit of an odd line there in the sky. So I think you can just see the shape of of a sphere in the sky. I said there might be some conflict between the volume slabs, so I probably should have separated those two out, but considering it took a couple of hours to render this backdrop, and I don't want to bore you with going through the whole process again, obviously I needed to separate the effect of the sun, maybe make that small and bring it forward so it fitted underneath them separately, but you know, you learn from your mistakes. So that's it. That's the next phase, if you like, of the sunset scene. Now I've got the HDRI backdrop, as you can see it renders very quickly, then that can be incorporated and used for a backdrop in another scene with foreground elements, and because the backdrop's there and it's already ready to be included, then I just put something in to add for the final image. So that's the end of that tutorial, and the next thing, for continue this scene, I'll use the backdrop and put some foreground elements in, so that this is mostly things will be in silhouette with the sun being in front of the camera if I choose this position. So that's that.